Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. So I didn't go in depth into this in the last upload, in which I entitled Nigga America and its creation of Deion Jackson. And I titled it that way intentionally. And I'm not comparing Deion's sacrifice with Derrick Jackson's grift. I'm contrasting them. How, in a nutshell, Deion Sanders is all kind of itch bass for the muckers because he signed with a university that he did not know at the time didn't have the money to pay him, and how Derrick Jackson needs to be forgiven and we need to not cast the first stone and all this other stuff. I want to go more in depth about Mr. Sanders. The fact is, Black America forced him. Nigga America forced Mr. Sanders to leave. Where he went was irrelevant, but we forced him to leave that job because at JSU, as he stated, something didn't add up. And maybe there was a reason, maybe not. Now, growing up in the deepest of the South, myself, and in Jackson, Jackson's about a 2-hour drive to get to any of the Gulf Coast. I don't necessarily mean the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. I'm not sure how long a drive that is. I haven't driven directly in between those two, so I'm not sure, but probably not longer than 2 hours, maybe not 3. I guess it depends on which road you take. I know that to get from Jackson to New Orleans is a little bit over 2 hours. To get from Jackson to any of the big cities on the coast of Louisiana, about 2 hours. You get from Jackson to New Orleans in 2. You can get from Jackson to Baton Rouge in 2. 2 hours and 45 minutes to get you to Lafayette. I know how that culture is in that deep South. And he's going to be dealing with, I don't know where he's from, but he's going to be dealing with a lot of Negroes that are from there. And they got contacts there. And they're looking out for each other there. And he's an outsider coming in for a good salary. But he wasn't going to get the same backup. That's what I know. I also know that you can tell that Nigga America created him. And here's how you can tell. See, Mr. Sanders would only have been treated worse than what he is now if he had been strictly academic. If he had been a professor, he would have already not been paid as much as a coach. But if he had gone in as a professor and done academically what he was doing athletically and somewhat academically as much as he could, because he did tell his students, you better stay on these books and study. And that's what he's supposed to do. And see, if he went and told his students academically, strictly from the classroom, you are going to learn to write and spell correctly in English, especially if it's your first language, or you will fail and you will keep failing till you get it right in Word. There, and there have 3 different spellings. Your and your have 2 different spellings. It's and its have 2. Want and won't are not spelled the same way, and won't requires an apostrophe in word. If he had simply done that, he would have been treated even worse. He wouldn't have been treated like a sellout the day that he signed with someone else. He would have been treated like a sellout the day that he said these things to a classroom full of usins. Because for whatever reason, we look at us and we think that with melanocyte activity and 4C hair, we can't be literate. That's what we think. Man, you know what I meant. No, let me tell you what's going on here. In my new job, I've been asked to do more than just teach this time. We are not yet in classes, but I am required to assist with testing the students because the candidates to get into the school, into this academy, have to take a test. Some fail, some pass. The ones who fail get an interview. They get to redeem themselves in the interview when it's easy, and you know that many of them still fail. Because in the interview, remember, the Bedouins are not intellectual. And I'm not in one of the big cities. Still in Bedouin area. They used to be much worse. They're getting better, but there's still this anti-intellectualism in them, especially when they're from the villages of these Bedouin areas and not even a city with an airport, even a domestic one. Let me tell you what goes on here. These N-words, and it's messed up, but these N-words show up, get a failing grade, and we say to them, I'm going to ask you 3 questions in English. All you got to do is answer. And if you make a mistake in your English, that's normal, but you do have to answer in English, and you got to give us more than one word. So all they got to do is understand the question, which depends on how well they paid attention before they ever got to us. Answer in English, answer with more than one word, but answering the question that we did ask. The mistakes won't count against them if they meet these requirements. And we will sit up and say, okay, first question. How many brothers and sisters do you have? 12. 12 what? 12. Dummy, you just screwed up the first thing, because we tell them in Arabic what the instructions are. And they still don't get it right. Why? Because they're so used to doing this and being as lazy as possible in everything that they do. They even do it in their speech. And then you tell them answering more than one word goes in one ear and out the other. You might as well have told them in Portuguese. You know that there are those who get upset because you told them to put a sentence together. I'm not joking. You didn't require that the grammar be correct. You just required the effort. Why? There are students that are so lazy that no matter which language they're speaking, if something breaks, they don't even tell you it's broken. They point at it and say the noun of it twice, and then they make this up hand signal that doesn't have a meaning to anybody because they don't want to say it doesn't work even in their own language. But when you call them on this, they actually get upset. You can make some of them angry with you by saying to them, can you say that in proper Arabic? I'm not joking. You know why I'm telling you about them? Because they think that they're the only ones like this. They think that they have a spiritual value based on their ethnicity, based on their Bedouia. They think they're the only ones with their particular problems and bad habits. And they think there's some chosen of God that just need to find a way to redeem themselves. And then they'll just turn into these miraculously moral, glowing figures. Does that sound familiar at all? But in the meantime, if you come, especially from amongst them, and you come with academic standards and intellectual standards, they count you as a sellout and a traitor. Does that sound familiar? Why do they think they're the only ones like this? Because they're so ethnocentric, they don't care to learn about anybody else, except the colonizer, of course. Now that's different. Does that sound familiar? We don't care to know anything about other people that have been colonized, but we all know that we need to know about the colonizer and understand them. And we do have to, we're forced to, but we don't care to know about anybody that's been colonized. That's where you really learn about the world, when you know both. And when you're interested in learning about the other people that have been colonized, whether they went through worse than you, better than you, or a combination that makes it impossible to compare and contrast. That's when you learn about the world. Most of you don't even want to hear about anybody else, except when you decide that you want to start putting the rest of us down. Well, you know, these other people got their stuff together, like that dude wearing eyeliner on the Geek Underground's video. That guy had that problem, talking about, well, you know, these other races, you comparing these women to other races of women, but they men got militaries and governments. So why are their men and their women flocking to the States in many cases? And why are they lucky if they get a visa? And why are they handpicked to be the ones that are malleable enough, but also handpicked to be the ones that aren't broken to where we would be able to see them and know they are broken. Did you know that when the groups of people have been given priority to get out of where they are from to go to the States because of maybe some assistance in a war, like certain groups of Iraqis who were translators, and Afghans who were translators, just translators, they were given priority to leave and go to the UK or the United States when Afghanistan fell to the Taliban. Or rather, I shouldn't even say when it fell. They were given priority. But when you've got groups of people that were given priority and it was not based on something to do with education, but rather just foot soldiering, fighting on behalf of the states in a war, do you know what winds up happening? Let me tell you what happens. You get to see the trash that otherwise would have been left behind. When the Hmong people were allowed to go into the states because they're Hmong and because they sided with the states in the war, you got the best and the worst, just like with any other group of people. A lot of us don't understand that, but that's who you got. You had the gangsters, you had the engineers. Stop and think about that. The Vietnamese were not highly prized by other Asian nationalities that made it to the West, especially the United States, until recently when they began to start looking down at us and prioritizing coupling up with massa. I mean, the Vietnamese were some of the most ethnic of the Asians that we knew at one point. There were enough of them to where we knew them. We knew more about them than we knew about people from the Philippines because they were in larger numbers. And now look at them. Do you see the difference? Now, I want y'all to stop for a second and understand that these groups of people have had folks that want to help, and they've been driven the uck out. Did you know that in Bedouin areas a few decades ago, when the Ministry of Education was taking teachers from one region of the country and always putting them in other regions, usually starting their teaching careers off in villages nobody wanted to live in, that they weren't from, that had to put in about a year and a half, that if they were serious about their job, they could be missing, gone. You have an ocean of desert here. Gone. There was one guy that used to teach with me at an institute in the evenings when I had a night job at one point. Nice guy. He talked about how his brother was sent to some village that they weren't from, because that's what the Ministry of Education does a lot of times. They do this oftentimes to give coverage to these villages nobody wants to go to. Okay, you're a brand new teacher. Guess what? We're going to put you where nobody else wants to live, where even the people who live there want to leave. We're going to put you there. You do about 2 years there, and you can go to where you want. They do this. Guess what? His cousin that started this was over a decade ago. The teacher telling me this was a kid at the time. He didn't get to meet this cousin. But the whole family knew. He was sent to some village. It was somewhere in the north of this kingdom. He was an honest guy, and he just wound up missing. Just didn't show up for work. He was never at home. Nobody could find him. And the cops were never going to catch the killer, because whoever the killer was, he was guaranteed to be related to some of the cops. Now, why was this the case? Well, because the cops that become cops from that village get to stay in that village because nobody wants to go there. Now, if you're from a nice city and you become a cop, they start you off where nobody wants to live and nobody wants to go. But if you're from one of these little jerkwater villages and you want to stay there because that's where your family is, you could have your whole career there and never have to live somewhere else. And since these cops had the comfort of not only being very numerous for the population, but being related to the people in that village, that nobody was going to get caught. A year later, his skeleton was found. I don't want to hear that we're the only group of people that do this to our intended helpers. At first, I don't want to hear that, because that's also nigger mentality. That means you don't take the time to actually know folks from other groups of people. You don't want to. You're comfortable not knowing anything except what Massa tells you on TV. Stop it. But we are one group of people that takes our Deion Sanders and drives them away. And the only way he would have gotten it worse is if he'd been a teacher or a professor and he raised the standards. And one of the ways that I know that that's the case is because I've seen journalism. I've watched in recent years as journalism has deteriorated in its spelling because proofreaders aren't checking, or they're not even hired in order to check. The journalists who are supposed to know how to read and write properly in the language in which they're practicing journalism are now coming out of colleges not knowing how to. So there, and there, they spell them the same. Your and your, they spell them the same. Deer and deer, bear and bear, they spell them the same. I'm not joking. They will sit up and say something like, he did this with his bare hands, and instead of spelling it B-A-R-E, which means naked, they spell it B-E-A-R, which is either the animal or it is the verb to carry and tolerate something. This is what they do and get away with it these days. We see articles like this, some articles to which we share links in the Root and other publications like that have these issues. You take somebody that comes along and simply says, stop it, raise the bar, cut this mess out. And what happens? We drive them out, call them all kinds of sellouts. Now some of your more talented Saudi citizens who have dual citizenship are going to other countries in which they have citizenship and working government jobs. And people are sitting up and saying, that's selling out. Stay with the country. Well, I mean, if they could, they would, but you won't let them. Oh, he went and studied education in another country and became a teacher there. We need them to stay and be teachers over here. Yeah, but they can't because you're anti-intellectual, nigga. You think it's okay. I'm not joking. I wish I was, but I'm not. We got kids here can't even spell spell properly in their own language. Won't punctuate. Absolutely not. You correct an error for them that they made in English, and you wait on them to repeat the correction to store it, and they just look at you. You don't even know if they heard the correction or not. Did you hear what I just said? Yeah. Say it again. Repeat it. Repeat what? Dummy. I'm not joking. I wish I was. The real issue is that it is colonized people in general that are doing this to those who want to help them the most. Why do I say that? Because since we're now coming to a point where we're critically analyzing ourselves, and there is a counter movement to that, which the BMPTs constitute largely, shout out to you, brothers. We black traits contribute to largely. That means that we get to be the first people, thinking we're the only ones that have these problems. We get to be the first people to internally decide to correct these things without being complete sellouts in real life by simply imitating the colonizer. Holding yourself to standards is different from that. And we can do that. And other people would learn from this, whether we wanted them to or not. What I'm saying is that if it really does wind up being the case, you wind up, in a sense, looking into how to save yourself, whether you want to or not, you're going to teach this to other people. We are literally in a position to be somebody else's salvation again without even wanting to. I'm not even saying that out of love or hatred for other groups of people. I'm saying that as a testament to our potential. I hope this helps you. Thank you for listening. Black heart, black mind, blackout, assalamu alaikum. Black heterosexual, non-select male power just because they don't like it, and black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day. Thank you for choosing to fly with Jet Black Airways again, where jet black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off. Justice forever.